Usually when we sit down to prep for one of these deep dives, we're looking at something loud.
Right. A market crash, a big tech story.
Exactly. But the stack of reports we're looking at today, it all starts with something that is, on the surface, incredibly quiet.
It's the kind of thing that usually ends up, on page 6 of the newspaper.
Yeah, buried somewhere. I was doing my morning scan of the wires, and this headline pops up. Somalia and Saudi Arabia sign military cooperation agreement.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be honest, I almost kept scrolling. I mean, the photo is just standard diplomatic stock footage.
Oh, totally. You've got Somalia's defense minister, Ahmed Moalem Fiki, shaking hands with Prince Khalid bin Salman.
Right. In Riyadh, polite lighting, sharp suits. It just looks like bureaucratic housekeeping.
Strengthening defense ties, mutual interests. It's the specific language of diplomacy that's designed to put you to sleep.
So you don't ask too many questions. But our mission here is to look past the press release. And when we started digging into the analysis around this, the briefings, the commentary, you realize this isn't a handshake. It's a smoke signal.
It's a frantic signal.
Yeah.
If you take this, boring meeting in Riyadh and you place it on a map, and then you overlay the timeline of the last few weeks,
the whole picture changes.
Completely.
Yeah.
This isn't about Saudi Arabia suddenly deciding to be nice to Somalia. This is about a massive geopolitical scramble triggered by something that happened just weeks earlier.
And that event, it didn't happen in Riyadh or Mogadishu.
Yeah.
The sources point us to two other cities entirely, Hargeisa and Jerusalem.
That's the pivot point. To understand the Saudi move, you have to understand the Israeli move that came first. The sources are very clear on this. This deal is a reaction.
A response.
A direct response to a diplomatic earthquake that I think largely flew under the radar for most people, but it shook the foundations of the Horn of Africa. Israel has formally recognized Somaliland as an independent state.
Which is just a massive sentence to drop into a conversation. Israel recognizes Somaliland. Okay, before we even unpack why that terrified the Saudis, we need to do some level setting.
Yeah.
Because for a lot of people, I think the distinction between Somalia and Somaliland it's a bit blurry. The names are similar, the geography. What's the actual status here?
It is a crucial distinction. And if you get this wrong, you miss the whole story. If you look at a standard world map, Somaliland just looks like the northern chunk of Somalia.
Same color on the map.
Right. But on the ground, the reality has been radically different for over 30 years.
How different are we talking?
Oh, night and day. Since 1991, while southern Somalia, the part ruled from Mogadishu, was descending into civil war, warlordism, and extremism like al-Shabaab.
Somaliland just checked out.
They declared independence. They effectively divorced themselves from all the chaos in the south.
So they've been operating as their own country since the early 90s?
Effectively, yes. The sources really highlight this contrast. Somaliland has its own currency, its own passport, its own police force, its own army.
Functioning institutions.
And they've held multiple democratic elections, which international observers have called, mostly free and fair. It's a stable state in a very rough neighborhood.
But, and this is the big catch, until now, nobody significant recognized them. They were a ghost state.
Exactly. The African Union, the UN, the U.S., everyone stuck to the one Somalia policy. They treated Mogadishu as the only legitimate government. So Somaliland was just in this legal limbo. They had the merit, but not the paperwork.
Which brings us back to the catalyst. Israel breaks the stalemate. Why? What does Israel get out of this?
Well, it's never just about making friends in geopolitics, right?
Right.
It's about strategy, pure strategy.
Okay.
Israel has a long history of what they call the periphery doctrine, seeking alliances with non-Arab states on the edge of the Middle East. But more specifically, just look at the map. Somaliland sits on the Gulf of Aden.
The approach to the Red Sea.
Correct. So by recognizing Somaliland, Israel isn't just making a political statement. They're securing a potential ally on one of the most critical maritime choke points in the world.
So if you're Israel, surrounded by potential adversaries, having a friendly port in the Horn of Africa is a massive strategic asset.
A massive asset.
Okay, so Israel makes its move. It legitimizes Somaliland. For Hargeisa, this is the golden ticket they've been waiting for. But for Saudi Arabia, the sources call this a wake-up call. Why? Why do they care if Israel has an embassy in Hargeisa?
Because Saudi Arabia considers the Red Sea its backyard. I mean, historically, they view it almost as an internal lake. They want to be the dominant power there. It's about their sphere of influence.
And suddenly they look across the water and see a new player setting up shop.
They see two things. First, the fragmentation of Somalia, which adds uncertainty. But the big one is they see a rival influence, or at least a non-Saudi influence, gaining a permanent foothold on the western coast.
I remember one of the quotes from the analysis. It was really dramatic.
It was. It's from a diplomat at the African Union Summit who put it very bluntly. They said, Saudi has woken up and realized that they might lose the Red Sea.
Lose the Red Sea. I mean, that sounds hyperbolic, but when you look at the economics, the stakes are staggering. We're not just talking about fishing rights here.
No, not at all.
Ah.
We are talking about the global economy's jugular vein. It's not hyperbole when you look at the data. Roughly 10% of global trade passes through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. That's that narrow neck of water between Yemen and the Horn.
The Gate of Tears.
Exactly. Oil, consumer goods, your Amazon packages, it all funnels through there. And Somaliland owns a massive stretch of that coastline, hundreds of miles of it,
Including the port of Berbera.
which is a key deep-water asset.
Yeah.
So if Israel has the ear of the government that controls that coast, Saudi Arabia feels squeezed.
They feel like they're being encircled.
Precisely. They suddenly realized that while they were looking elsewhere, the map changed. So this rush to sign a deal with Mogadishu, the official government, is a countermove. It is reactionary politics 101.
And they had largely ignored the Horn of Africa for decades.
Right. It wasn't a central part of their foreign policy. But the moment Israel changes the status quo, Riyadh realizes they have no leverage. They need a partner. So they fly Minister Fiki to Riyadh and sign a defense deal to say, hey, we are still the big dog in this region.
It's so interesting you use the word reactionary because the sources draw this really fascinating contrast between Saudi Arabia and another major player,
Yes.
the UAE.
Yes. This is one of the most insightful parts of the analysis. We tend to lump the Gulf states together, but in the Horn of Africa, they are playing two very different games.
And how does the source characterize that difference?
They describe Saudi Arabia as reactive, scrambling to fix a problem. But they describe the UAE as having foresight.
Because the UAE was already there.
Long before this, the UAE has been executing a very deliberate port strategy for over a decade. They didn't wait for a crisis. They just bought the infrastructure.
So DP World, the big Emirati logistics company.
They basically run the port of Berbera in Somaliland. They've invested hundreds of millions to modernize it. So while Saudi Arabia is worried about losing the Red Sea, the UAE has effectively already bought the real estate.
They bet on the coast, not the governments.
Precisely. They're pragmatic. They saw Somaliland was stable and open for business, so they invested there, regardless of what the UN thought. They've invested all up and down the coast. Somaliland, Puntland, Eritrea.
And that's caused a lot of friction, hasn't it? The government in Mogadishu is furious with the UAE.
Furious might be an understatement.
Yeah.
Mogadishu views the UAE's direct dealings with Somaliland as a total violation of their sovereignty.
It's like bypassing the parents to make a deal directly with the teenager who moved out.
That's a great analogy. And the parents are not happy. And there's a specific accusation from Mogadishu that makes this even messier.
Oh, right. The theory that the UAE actually
Facilitated the Israeli recognition. The idea is that the UAE, which has ties with Israel through the Abraham Accords, is acting as the bridge, helping Israel set up shop.
Okay, so if you're the government in Somalia, you feel completely under siege. You've lost control of the north. The UAE is funding this breakaway region. Now Israel is recognizing them. You need friends, and fast.
And that is why they ran straight to Riyadh. It creates this bizarre triangle. Somalia is pushing the UAE away, canceling security agreements, kicking out trainers, and pivoting hard towards Saudi Arabia and Qatar.
Wait, let's touch on that. Qatar is involved too.
They are the other side of this coin. The sources note that Somalia recently signed a defense pact with Qatar as well.
So Mogadishu is trying to build a new coalition.
A coalition of anyone but the UAE and Israel.
It's a balancing act. Mogadishu is militarily weak. They're still fighting al-Shabaab, but they're using their sovereign legitimacy to pull in these big powers.
Exactly. They're playing the sovereignty card. They're telling Saudi Arabia, if you want to stop Israel and the UAE, you have to back us. We're the legitimate government with the seat at the UN, and Saudi Arabia, in its panic, is buying in.
It really highlights how much agency these so-called smaller states actually have.
They do. But it's a dangerous game. By inviting Saudi Arabia and Qatar in, you're militarizing the region. You are importing Middle Eastern rivalries onto your own soil.
And there's an ideological layer to this too. Somalia's president, Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, he used very specific language about Israel.
He did. He vowed to oppose any Israeli presence in Somaliland, which is a smart political move.
Yeah, how so?
By framing the conflict as stopping Israel, he taps into broader Arab and Islamic sentiment. It makes it much harder for a country like Saudi Arabia not to support him.
Right. They can't be seen as letting Israel just walk all over the region.
Exactly.
So we have a region splitting down the middle. On one side, Somaliland, backed by Israeli recognition and Emirati money. On the other, Somalia, backed by Saudi and Qatari support, trying to reassert control.
That is the new battle line. And what's fascinating is that this validates what the sources call the new reality.
Okay, break that down. What's the new reality?
The old way of thinking was, Somalia is one country, Mogadishu is the capital, and we fix things by supporting the central government. That was the lens of the U.S., the UN, for 30 years.
And that lens is broken.
It's shattered. The new reality is that the Horn of Africa is a collection of distinct power centers. Hargeisa is one, Mogadishu is another. And the external powers, Israel, the UAE, Saudi, they're no longer pretending the old fiction is true.
It feels like Somaliland is the biggest winner in all this. They've been shouting about their stability and democracy for 3 decades, but merit didn't get them recognition.
Strategic utility did. That is the cynical but undeniable lesson here.
So they didn't get recognized because they held a nice election. They got recognized because Israel needed a strategic foothold.
And the UAE needed a port. It confirms that old saying. Geography is destiny. If Somaliland was landlocked in the middle of the continent, this never would have happened. But because they sit on that Red Sea balcony, they're indispensable.
Let's zoom out before we close. We started with a simple military deal. But what are the real risks here if this rivalry heats up? What happens to that 10% of global trade?
That is the trillion-dollar question. If this political friction turns into physical friction, naval blockades, skirmishes, the shipping insurance rates go through the roof.
And we've all seen how fragile supply chains are.
Exactly. We saw it with the Ever Given in the Suez Canal. We're seeing it with Houthi attacks. If the Horn of Africa becomes an active conflict zone between these proxy powers, the cost of your oil, your coffee, it all goes up.
It explains the scramble. Nobody wants to be on the outside looking in if that waterway gets choked off.
And Saudi Arabia just realized they were on the outside. That handshake in Riyadh wasn't a celebration. It was a corrective measure.
A desperate attempt to buy a seat at the table.
Before the game is over.
So looking forward, what's the next domino? What should we be watching for?
Watch the money and watch the ports. Does Saudi Arabia actually start building bases in Somalia? And on the other side, does Israel actually open an embassy in Hargeisa? Does the U.S. or the U.K. follow suit?
Because if a major Western power follows Israel's lead, that's game over for the One Somalia policy, isn't it?
It would be the final nail in the coffin.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, the momentum is on Somaliland's side. They have the stability and the location. Somalia have the legal title, but they're losing the de facto argument.
It's just a fascinating case study in how the world actually works versus how it's supposed to work on paper.
The map is being redrawn in real time. We're just catching up to it.
This has been a massive unpacking of what looks like such a tiny news item.
It's proof that in this region, there's no such thing as a small story.
Before we sign off, there's one thought from the analysis that really stuck with me. We talk about Somaliland finally getting its moment, but there's a darker side to that story.
Yeah, the question of motivation.
Right. Somaliland has been a model citizen for 30 years. They did everything right, built institutions, kept the peace, and the world ignored them.
Totally. Because it was inconvenient.
And they are only being embraced now because other nations are panicking about their own security. It suggests that on the international stage, legitimacy isn't about how well you govern. It's about what you can offer a foreign power in a moment of crisis.
It's a transactional world. And if borders can be redrawn based on the security anxiety of a third party, like in Israel or Saudi Arabia, well, then you have to ask, where else is this going to happen? Are we entering an era where sovereignty is just a commodity to be traded for military access?
That's a heavy thought to end on, but I think it's the right one. The map isn't fixed. It's negotiable. And right now, the highest bidders are circling the Horn of Africa.
We'll be watching to see who closes the deal.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. Keep your eyes on the headlines and remember to read between the lines. We'll catch you on the next one.